I got a 68 on my first ever test as a pre-med student, but I ended up graduating with. So I actually got a 68 on my first ever exam as a pre-med student. I remember it so vividly. It was in comparative physiology, this notoriously hard pre-med class. And I thought when I got that grade back, it was over for me. I wasn't going to be a doctor. I wasn't going to be able to cut out to take these pre-med classes. And maybe it was that Cornell was too tough for me, or maybe it was just that pre-med in general was too tough for me. And I remember just feeling so defeated when I got that first exam back, because coming from high school where, to be honest, everything was pretty easy. I still worked hard. I know some students can go through high school and get basically a perfect GPA and not even work at all.
That was easy.
I still did have decent study habits in the beginning, going into college, but it generally was a very direct relationship. If I studied hard, I got straight A's in high school. And now doing this in college, I studied hard, but I did not get an A on the first exam. And so this was definitely a big surprise for me. And I really had to go back to the drawing board and figure out what was I doing wrong that led to such a bad result. And now I will say this comparative physiology class, it was a lot more of a critical thinking test than I was used to, and that actually I found out a couple of years later is very similar to how the MCAT is structured. But some classes are just straight memorize the information, you can get it right on the test. This was not the case. So I had to figure out better study habits to really let me synthesize the information and properly learn and encode that information so that I can do well on the exams. So I'm going to tell you a couple of things that really started to help me, and hopefully you can apply this to whether you're studying for pre-med classes or really anything in college. Now, the first thing was to make sure you're not procrastinating. And I usually was one to get ahead in my studying, but I would really, in the last 2-3 days before the test, put in a maximal effort, and I feel like that's where my biggest improvements were. And for such a hard class like this, I realized that I wasn't going to be able to just go hard 2 or 3 days out and then magically pull off a great grade. I really needed to start learning that information from the second it's being taught. And so what I would start to do is I would do pre-readings for the class and get myself familiar with the information, and then I would go to lecture and really just absorb that information. I wouldn't go crazy with taking notes because I would have already prepped the information and studied it, so that way when I listened in lecture, I was really filling in the gaps of what I already didn't know. And then after that, I would work on teaching the material to a peer, or honestly, sometimes I would just record myself and teach it out loud, because I realized that I couldn't just memorize information. I had to understand the concepts, especially the way this specific class was testing it. And that's something you'll find, especially for like the MCAT or USMLEs. You really like memorization is important, but you need to be able to understand these concepts to do well in these harder classes. Now, I wish I knew about Anki and spaced repetition back when I was a freshman, but I did not. So if you're watching this video or you've seen any of my other videos on higher level learning tactics, then congrats, you're already way ahead of what I was like. But I realized that I still needed to make improvements, and that there's always improvements you can make to your studying. And so by just implementing a few of these strategies, and also humbling myself and realizing that maybe it's not going to come as easy to me in college, and showing up to office hours, that was also a really key thing for me, was trying to get inside the professor's mind. And the best way to do that is speak to the professor as frequently as I could. So I went to all the office hours, really tried to learn the information from the source that was going to be testing it, and also adapted my study habits to fit that testing style. And I was actually able to pull off an A at the end of the class because of, one, the way it was curved, and also I started to crush all the exams moving forward, and I ended up being a TA in this comparative physiology class, and actually that led me down my path of finding a love for teaching. And so the moral of the story, I know I was rambling a little bit, is that you shouldn't let one bad grade, even 2 bad grades, let you feel down as a pre-med student. You can always overcome one bad grade, and honestly, a whole bad semester, a whole bad 2 semesters. I've even had pre-meds have a whole bad 4 years, work with our Premed Consultants program, do a post-bac, and then get into medical school. So it's never too late, but at some point you have to realize, if you're not doing well, why are you not doing well? What can you do to start making improvements? Maybe you don't have the right study strategies down. Maybe you have decent study strategies, but you actually don't ever focus during that time because you're always on your phone or have other distractions. Whatever that may be, you have to, at some point, if you really want to excel as a pre-med student and then a medical student, you have to be able to humble yourself and realize that if you're not doing well, there is a reason for it, but it doesn't mean that you can't make improvements. And so that's what I did. And I'm always constantly trying to learn better study habits to become more efficient, even to this day, having almost finished medical school at this point. So hope this video was helpful. If you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe. We're putting out tons of pre-med content this year, and I really hope this can be helpful for you. So if you're liking these videos, it would mean the world to me if you'd subscribe so I know to keep putting this content out, and I will see you in the next one.